who say the change would give Musk and his company town too much power. Keith Peters, Washington.
This could be a movie. Over the last few weeks, a woodpecker has broken more than 24 mirrors in at least one vehicle's side window in Rockport, Massachusetts. But residents taking the violence in stride and having a good laugh about it. One avian biologist says lots of smaller birds will be aggressive against their own reflections. More on these stories at townhall.com. I'm John Scott.
The following is an America Matters media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
Just another word for nothing left to lose. Come together right now over me.
All right, folks, you certainly know what that theme song means by now. That's right, it's time for another episode of America Matters. I'm your host, Leo Zacky, with Eddie Floyd and Shannon Lawson there in the studio. We got Joshua Matriciana joining us again today. Glad to have him with us.
Amen.
Everybody, it is May the 1st. It's 12:05 p.m. We're into May now. This year is flying by. We got 100 days plus of Trump under our belt. We got a lot of things to talk about. Before we do, I want to say hello and thank you to everybody out there listening on 93.7 KPGF as well as AM 1060, and to all the folks out there listening on the Answer Network, the Radio for America Network, the Salem Network, the Kevin Jackson Network, and AUN Television, and to everybody out there who makes it possible for that broadcast to reach all those wonderful listening ears. Don't forget, folks, you can always watch the show live or watch the replays on America Matters Media's Facebook or LinkedIn page, or you can simply go to Zacky Radio on YouTube or Rumble. Don't forget to comment on that. We'll see those. We want to hear from you. You can also text in at 775-384-4444. Eddie, what's going on, brother? I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thank you very much, Leo. Well, I tell you what, once again, I've broken this out a little bit because I've got a big topic on the tab on religious freedom under Trump administration in 2025. There's been a lot happening since Vice President J.D. Vance's big speech at the International Religious Freedom Summit back in February, Leo.
Yeah, Eddie, that speech really set the tone. Vance made it clear this administration isn't just restoring religious freedom, it's expanding it, both here at home and around the world.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you this. He took a hard stance, criticizing past governments for, as he put it, persecuting religious individuals, and he made it a strong pledge. The administration would stop funding non-governmental organizations overseas that are pushing anti-religious agendas.
Well, I just want us to stop funding all non-governmental organizations, period. But he also gave a big shout out to Secretary of State Marco Rubio for his global work on religious liberty. And the real question is what's happened since that speech?
Right. Well, you know, in my opinion, a lot's happened. For starters, Trump signed an executive order in February creating the task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias, led by Attorney General Pam Bondi. Its job of the organization is to review federal agencies for any signs of bias against Christians and recommend solutions.
Well, and that's not all. The administration also launched the White House Faith Office with Paula White Cain, a familiar name in evangelical circles.
Right.
As its head, and that office is meant to support faith-based organizations and help strengthen American families, promote work, and safeguard religious liberty.
Absolutely, and internationally, okay, Vance has been busy. Just last month, he went to the Vatican and met with the Cardinal the day before the Pope died.
Oh, wow. Well, they talked about religious freedom and humanitarian issues when they were there together in the Vatican.
Right.
And Vance had a brief meeting with Pope Francis on Easter Sunday, just one day before he passed away, which is quite remarkable.
It is.
kind of having that last opportunity to have a discussion with the outgoing pontiff. So it's pretty wild.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it is.
But let's talk a little bit more about Trump's faith office,
Okay.
which he started officially on February 7th of this year, and it's under Executive Order 14205, which officially launched the new White House Faith Office. So it marks a significant chapter in the relationship between faith communities and the federal government. And at the helm of this new office is none other than televangelist Paula White Cain, a longtime spiritual advisor to Trump and well-known figure in both religious and political circles. And according to the White House, the Faith Office mission is clear. It's to support faith-based organizations, promote religious liberty, and combat anti-Christian bias across the federal agencies. And we've been seeing the destruction of religion here in this country and how they shout down God, and they certainly like to make a mockery out of Christianity.
Yep.
Even though this is a Christian country. And that's where I stand with it. That's how it's always been. It's been based on Christian values. So the task force mission is to identify and eliminate government policies that are seen as discriminatory towards Christians, working closely with agencies like the DOJ, the IRS, and even the FBI. So It's going to be interesting to see where this goes. Josh, you're someone who's well versed in, the founding documents and basically what this country was founded on. I mean, what's your take on this?
Well, my dad was an ordained minister. And so growing up, we had, we prayed at every meal. We had a morning Bible study where we read a chapter of Proverbs every day. So Judeo-Christian values is a big part of our family. And, throughout my whole life, I've watched the political decline, first taking prayer out of schools, and it's been kind of a slippery slope. The problem that we're facing here is that, our country is founded on Judeo-Christian values, but our whole electoral system, everything about it is based on the fact that we have a moral constituency. Like, you have to have a baseline that is essentially morality. And if you take God out of that, then you basically have an immoral populace. And there's no definition of what is right, what is wrong. So it's kind of like losing our anchor, and we start to go crazy, like with what the really nuts part of the left wing is coming in, and they're talking about, oh, well, this feels good, or this is the whole morality question comes, it totally completely removes it from reality. So it takes away, basically what it does is, if when you take God and morality out of the whole idea, well, it really inhibits our ability to actually govern properly. Because what's right, what's wrong? Do we kill people for this? Do we kill people for that? And different religions have different standards. And the fact that we have a Judeo-Christian faith-based system, our political system is essentially hinges on that.
Right.
Well, it's nice to see the emphasis here that we're bringing the Christian values back into this country to help bring that level of morality so we can actually function properly. So that's a really good sign, and I'm excited to see what comes of it. But we're going to take our first break here on America Matters. I'm Leo Zacky with Eddie Floyd Lawson, and joining us today is Joshua Matriciana. We'll be right back.
Ugh, I'm so over this. I diet, I work out, and the scale won't budge.
I hear you. Nothing's more discouraging than doing all that work and seeing no result.
I just don't get it. I'm eating healthy, hitting the gym. What's your secret?
Honestly, I was in the same boat until I found Active Life Integrated Health.
Wait, what's different about them?
It's a natural weight loss approach. Dr. Tom and his team help with appetite suppression, energy boosts, hormone balancing, and the FM diet. It's not about starving yourself or exhausting workouts. It's about resetting your body to burn fat the right way.
I'm Dr. Waldorf, chiropractic physician at Active Life Integrated Health, where our natural approach helps you lose weight safely and effectively without extreme dieting or chemicals. Call 775-842-0065 today to schedule your complimentary consultation. Also, the first 25 callers who mention promo code HealthMatters will receive 10% off of your treatment program. So call 775-842-0065 to boost your energy and start losing weight today.
In times of market volatility, it can be a good reminder to revisit your financial strategies to make sure they align with your goals. Call 775-674-2222 or visit nvretirementplanners.com. Advisory services are offered through Nevada Retirement Planners, an investment advisor in the state of Nevada. Any insurance products and services are offered through Nevada Senior Advisors. Nevada Retirement Planners are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Nevada Retirement Planners does not provide legal or tax advice.
Can you define the 4 different parts of Medicare? Do you have Medicare prescription drug gap coverage? At Nevada Senior Advisors, we will walk through the different parts of Medicare, including Medicare Advantage, Medicare Supplement, Part D prescription drug plans to help you determine which option is right for you. Visit nvsenioradvisors.com, call 775-674-2223 to set up an appointment. Nevada Senior Advisors is not affiliated with or endorsed by the federal Medicare program or any other government agency. Calling this number will direct you to a licensed sales agent.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now back to the show.
All right, folks, we are back with America Matters. I'm Leo Zacky with Eddie Floyd and Shannon Lawson. And we got Joshua Matriciano with us today. And we were just talking about, this new faith office that Trump has got going on. And, I wanted to talk a little bit more about it, because one of the office's strongest allies on Capitol Hill is Senator Katie Britt of Alabama, who has publicly praised the move as a major victory for defending Christian values in American life. And Paula White Cain herself has been very active in the role so far. She recently met with a group of 90 Hispanic faith leaders and pastors, emphasizing the office's commitment to engaging with diverse religious communities. So beyond policy, she's also highlighted the ministry's outreach efforts, reporting that as of February 2025, they've distributed over 103,000 pounds of food and served more than 84,000 meals to families in need.
Wow.
There's a lot of, sounds like they're already off to a pretty good start. I'm sure we'll see those numbers really start to, just expand. And, another thing to ask is, what exactly is the faith office focusing on? And, the office has outlined several priorities, supporting faith-based adoption and foster care programs, promoting religious liberty across the federal government, facilitating partnerships between faith-based groups and federal agencies, and providing training and resources to help religious organizations access federal grants and contracts. And, these are not so small ambitions as the faith office begins hosting events and meetings with religious leaders nationwide. Many watching this whole thing to see, what the practical impact will be. So
Right.
I wonder what changes we'll see at the IRS, and how policies shift at the Department of Justice and, how they handle religious discrimination cases. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things that can stem from this.
I couldn't agree with you more. Leo, I'm going to ask a question and then we'll let Josh and you both answer, because the way I look at it is our government, if you look at it like a ship, if we don't have God at the helm, we're going to wind up on some island of derelict. That's my opinion.
Oh, yeah. No, we need to, like Josh was saying, I agree. We need to have a level of morality, and bringing back Christian values, I think, is going to be one of the most important things that we do in this country, because like Josh said, it brings this baseline of morality, which we don't have. And if you don't have a moral compass, how can you really know the difference between right and wrong? So I 100% agree with Josh in that regard. So
Amen.
Opening these opportunities up to religion, and, because the one thing that so many folks have been indoctrinated with is separation of church and state, and they've really lost the meaning of what that is. So I think it's a good thing to see religious organizations having an opportunity to do good and getting help and funding from the government to make that a reality. I mean, I would like to see the government just really focus more on taking care of, the basic nuts and bolts things and shrinking down, but to have an emphasis here on morality is something that we do need to return back into this country.
Right.
Well, to add my 2 cents to this, when it comes from a government perspective, I think, the government should be dealing with infrastructure, roads, the economies and how the different states interact with each other when it comes to trade. But we have this huge gap between where government responsibility lies and the actual the the best way or the best life that its constituents can live. So you've got you've got problems like homelessness, like they were saying, faith-based adoption of foster care programs. You have these things that really, I think the government should kind of allow the religious sector to take a bigger role on that. It's not the government's job to feed the homeless. It should be the church's job to feed the homeless. And
Right.
what I see this as that the government is empowering these faith-based organizations to do what, their desires and what that was mandated by, Jesus, for example. He says, go, feed those who are hungry, clothe those who are naked. But he doesn't tell the government to do that. He tells the faith leaders to do that. And I love that this is a step towards that direction. We're taking kind of the pressure off of the elected officials, but at the same time, we're allowing these much needed resources to be to have an active role in our society.
Yeah, and generally those organizations do a far better job than the government would do itself. I wonder what kind of regulations and things they'll be tied to be eligible for that kind of capital. But getting those religious entities to step up and do more in those, as opposed to, I don't know, pushing whatever they've been pushing previously that has been unsuccessful, they'll actually have an opportunity to make real impact.
Well, there's this word of caution, though, as we've seen with USAID in the past, and how, monies can be thrown and taken advantage of and exploited. So I'm going to say, even with with this faith, this faith outreach, we have to be cautious, because human nature still is evil in a lot of situations. And if posed with this, posed with having unlimited amount of government funds, that could corrupt any religion, any institution. I don't care if it's religious or not.
Right, and that's definitely a real concern. And look, if they're going to be spending any U.S. government money that they're going to be receiving, it needs to stay in the U.S., helping U.S. citizens, and shouldn't be going to, as much as, Eddie, I know you like to set up charities and build schools in Africa. I think any money that's coming from our government should be used to help our people in our country, And don't get me wrong, I think setting up schools and doing stuff like that in Africa and other places around the world is important, but that comes from individuals' own pockets and not the collective pocket of the entire nation.
Exactly. I agree.
So
that's a really good point, Leo. I think that distinction has to be made, because, when it comes from a morality standpoint, from the religious standpoint, it's like, okay, our mandate is to help all people. As a Christian, or someone with Judeo-Christian values, our mandate, is to help everyone, regardless of where they're from. But the government's mandate, with government tax dollars, is very different from what our religious mandate is. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that does, we do need to make sure that there's a clear distinction on that.
Absolutely. And I hope that's written into any sort of, funding that goes out to any of these religious entities through this organization. So we'll see how it all plays out. But anyways, I think we should move on to another subject here, talking about, what's going on, with this whole ecosystem that when you talk about Japan and the U.S. side by side, and, not in competition, but a deep dive into why we're looking at Japan and some of the longest living people in the world and what lessons the rest of us might be missing. So, want to put out a little disclaimer here before we begin. This episode discusses, smoking rates in Japan historically. And let's be clear, smoking is deadly. It causes cancer, heart disease, lung disease, and it takes, about 10 years off your life. So, this is not a smoking is okay conversation. It's how does lifestyle offset or compound risk conversation. This is coming from someone who was a smoker himself. So, let's dive into it. What do you say, guys?
Hey, yeah. I mean, I got something. This is kind of a continuation of yesterday's conversation. I thought that was so amazing that you were bringing up, the health factor of how the Japanese schools incorporate, nutrition by law into, the children's education. And now we're kind of going into the next part of it where it's like, okay, so that's actually paying off. The fact that they are, focusing on nutrition and holistic, healthy lifestyles. This is an interesting way of putting it, because we're in the United States, we're told that, oh, smoking is bad and smoking kills. However, we've got these studies that I'm sure you're going to bring up that talks about how it's counteracted with this healthy lifestyle.
Yeah. And to a degree, I kind of agree with that. I mean, I quit smoking years ago, but you know what? Every now and then I'll have an occasional cigarette at the right time. So just being honest. So let's rewind to the 1960s. In Japan, over 80% of men smoke cigarettes. And today it's still higher than in most countries. It's declining, however, but meanwhile, here in the United States, we've been rolling out anti-smoking campaigns, health warnings, graphic ads, all that stuff. And what shocked researchers is Japan consistently had lower rates of heart disease, obesity, and much higher life expectancy than the US. And the big question is why? Well, because health is never about just one factor. It's not did you smoke or not. It's how and what you eat and how much you move and how connected you are and how stressed you are and what your healthcare system looks like and what your meals look like. And
Right.
and after what we were talking about with the kids getting these great nutrition nowadays, I mean, people walk or cycle as a part of daily life. And look, but their infrastructure is designed to do that. Where in a lot of places in the United States, it's not really a viable option. And they have meals that are rooted in balance with rice and fish and vegetables, miso, seaweed, all that good stuff. And their portions are smaller. And the cultural norm is to stop eating when you're 80% full. And they call that harahachibu. And so the elders also remain socially engaged, respected, and active well into their 80s and 90s. So even though smoking was a factor, the rest of the lifestyle kind of, was a buffer, a web of small daily habits that added up to protection. And then you have things like sugar. I was talking about this with my buddies at hockey last night. This one hits harder because it's everywhere, and sugar comes in so many different forms, especially like high fructose corn syrup, and that's literally in everything. So in the United States, the average adult consumes about 126 grams of sugar a day. That's
Wow.
30 teaspoons every day, compared to in Japan, where they eat less than half, talking 58 grams a day. So, it's not, about donuts versus green tea sweets. It's about the hidden sugars in ketchup, salad dressing, pasta sauce, breakfast cereal, quote unquote, low fat snacks. It's sugar in your bread, your yogurt, your coffee creamer, even in your alcohol, like the high fructose corn syrup they use to color Jack Daniels, because it's not getting that color from sitting in barrels. Let me tell you. And it's not just about the weight gain. The high sugar consumption is related to insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, type 2 diabetes, and an increased risk of cancer. So especially in colorectal, which predominantly affects men, breast cancer, which predominantly affects women, and different oral cancers. So the research doesn't say that sugar causes it, but it certainly fuels it and allows those conditions to thrive. So we got to...
One thing on that, there's a lot of studies out there about the dangers of processed sugar and the amount of processed sugar. And when you think about, like, just to put this in comparison, I always have to have like visual examples for me to imagine something. When you think of a gram of sugar, that's basically the same as a sugar cube that you'd find at a restaurant, right? And so the average American, we're saying the average, that means the majority, that means that people are eating a lot more than this. Or, some people are eating less, but 126 sugar cubes, like that to me, like, puts it in perspective, like how much we're actually consuming. And you're right, Leo, it's hidden. It's in every single thing that you buy off the shelves pretty much in the United States. And it's not just regular sugar. It's not like sugar from honey, which is a natural good. It's not sugar from, like fructose, like out of fruits. This is highly refined sugar that is actually toxic, and it feeds the cancer. That cancer eats that. So it's giving the kind of the perfect storm to have Americans be unhealthy and sickness ridden.
100%. I want to talk a little bit more about this when we get back. We got to take our bottom of the hour break here on America Matters. I'm Leo Zacky with Eddie Floyd, Shannon Lawson, and Joshua Matriciana. We'll be right back.
Families of deceased and cremated veterans can apply to receive commemorative plaques or urns from VA. If they do not want to inter their loved ones in a VA national cemetery or receive a government-furnished headstone marker or medallion for placement in any cemetery, commemorative urns are used to hold the remains of a deceased cremated veteran, and commemorative plaques are designed to hang on a wall. If a family chooses a plaque or an urn, VA is prohibited by law from interring that veteran's remains in a VA national cemetery or from providing a headstone marker or medallion for placement in any cemetery. To be eligible, the veteran must have served in the armed forces on or after April 6, 1917, and must be eligible for a headstone or marker under 38 U.S.C. 2306D, and the veteran's remains must have been cremated with no portion of the remains interred at any location. For more information about the NCA memorial options, go to the VA website or contact David Otler, a NV Veterans Advocate with Walton's Funeral and Cremation, 775-843-1901.
I'm Andrew Saul, Commissioner of Social Security. I'm here to warn you about telephone scammers pretending to be government employees. Some of these scammers may say threatening things like you will be arrested if you don't make payments or provide personal information. Do not fall for these tricks. These calls are not from us. Real Social Security employees will never threaten you for information or money. If you receive a call like this, hang up. Never give the caller your personal information, like your Social Security number or bank account, or send money in any form, cash, gift cards, wire transfers, or prepaid debit cards. Report the call to our law enforcement arm, the Office of the Inspector General, at oig.ssa.gov. Share this information with your friends and family.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now back to the show.
All right, folks, we are back with America Matters. I'm Leo Zacky with Eddie Floyd, Shannon Lawson, and Joshua Matriciana today. And we've been talking about, kind of following up what we discussed yesterday about just the quality of life and health and nutrition that's going on in Japan versus what we're experiencing here. And we mentioned that on average, Americans are consuming about 126 grams of sugar a day compared to those in Japan, where they're consuming 58 grams of sugar a day. And it just comes in so many different shapes and forms. And Josh, you were telling everybody about how it's all hidden and how it fuels cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the problem here, and this is something I really appreciate that RFK has kind of made, like he started grandstanding this, the fact that America is unhealthy. And this is one of the key issues is the amount of processed foods, specifically sugar. So, when you're talking about this poison that's been so refined and then fed to not just us, but our children, that's where a big part of this has to. And, I've got 3 boys. And when I eat the food that they're being served, or when I see the food that they're being served at their cafeteria at school, like that is riddled with some of this processed stuff.
Right. And you mentioned that your neighbor brings that home, for you, and you've tried it and it makes you feel like crap.
Yeah, that's true. And it tastes gross and it makes me feel bad. I mean,
so I understand that. I mean, when kids in America are, basically given A, B, C, or D grade food, you never know what's going to be in it. And then, like with the SNAP program, the kind of deals, the supplemental nutrition, food situation, we don't know what deals are made behind the scenes with big companies like Frito-Lay, for example, that incentivize that push those garbage products that are full of sugar and high fructose corn syrup. So, and what they're doing in Japan when they have things like nutritionists at every school, and then their obesity rate is 4% and we're 42%. Is there really a question as to why? So, I mean, in Japan, we're talking about the food, the sweets and stuff, they have desserts. We have desserts too, but oh my God, everything is just so hyper sugarized in this country. But their desserts are often less sweet. And eaten in smaller portions and part of the balanced meal, and not a lifestyle built around snacking as well. So
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been to Japan, but when I was younger, I was involved in a missionary group, and one of our stops between smuggling Bibles into mainland China was in Japan. So I spent a day there. That's all I've been there for. But there is a huge difference with the lifestyle of the Japanese, and I love that we're putting them on blast essentially but in a good way, because there really is a difference in the type of food. They eat a lot of rice, they eat a lot of fresh food, and like you said yesterday, fresh food is mandated by law to feed the children. Like, why can't we adopt some of these common sense strategies to help our society get healthier? And this is where I'm glad that you're bringing this up.
well, it's important stuff to talk about, because I mean, I'm a firm believer in making America healthy again, and part of what I want to do here in California is hold California to the highest standards of health when it comes to food and the quality of food that we're not only serving but also producing. And whatever the U.S. government decides, we're going to hold ourselves to a much higher standard. If they don't outlaw glyphosate and atrazine, I will. So it's that simple. We have to make sure that we have good food available to as many people as possible, and having an abundance of water is going to allow us to grow plenty of it. So you guys have probably heard of the blue zones, right? Have you heard of these blue zone things?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. So for those who don't know, they're places where people regularly live past 100 and are still active and sharp and disease free. And on the short list are a couple of places. One being Okinawa, Japan, Ikaria, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, California, of all places.
Wow.
So these zones were identified by National Geographic researcher Dan Buettner, and the wild thing is that they all have similar patterns, without ever really communicating these with one another. These communities, strangely enough, it's a mostly plant-based diet. I'm not saying go be a vegetarian or a vegan, but they move more naturally. There's no gym culture. It's like gardening and walking and, manual tasks. But, places like Loma Linda, I think there's a little bit more affluence there where they can do that. So it's a little bit different lifestyle. And I would argue in places like Okinawa, in Greece and Italy, well, it has more to do with the fact that there's a lot of family culture. They're a little bit more removed from the beaten path. And you have this, like I said, the historical family precedence of family meals and home cooked meals, and what Nona cooks in the kitchen sort of thing. And then in places like Costa Rica, I think it has more to do with just the limited availability due to infrastructure and using what they have at their available to them. So they also live low stress lifestyles, and they have strong spiritual religious practices. And you can definitely see that in places like Costa Rica, for example, where literally everything down there is pura vida, which means pure life. I mean, you can just ask anybody, how's your day? And they'll respond, pura vida. Oh, how was the food at the restaurant? Oh, pura vida. That kind of lifestyle, that kind of low stress, easy living sort of thing. And then, in places like Greece, everything is, it's always family. They live on the islands. It's a beautiful place. And, same thing with Sardinia, again, that whole family concept. And then when you have places like, Linda, you just have extreme affluence where they don't have to really worry too much about anything. But I'm just giving you the breakdown of what kind of aids in these concepts. It's not just like, oh, do what they do. There's reasoning behind it.
Well, you bring up a super good point here. I mean, a lot of this has to do with their health is affected by their culture. And, like in the Mediterranean area, of course, it's very family centric. There's other things that probably play a role in it. The fact that you've got, like Italy, you've got smaller streets. Everyone walks everywhere. Every town has its main square. It's like this big open place that everybody goes and hangs out in the evenings, and that's where that's that's where they hang out, is in the main square. But it's primarily based on walking from place to place, having the culture and society that encourages not only family meals and where everybody comes and joins and has home cooked meals. Like food is a big, kind of a anchor point to all of these cultures that you've mentioned. But also, the society itself encourages people to meet up and interact, physically being there, not on FaceTime or digitally, but actually go and hang out. And I think that raises the happiness level, and I'm sure that happiness level has something to do with the health level as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also these places are definitely more off the beaten path, to say the least. It's not like these, places like Katia, Greece, or Sardinia, even Okinawa, have major travel to and from. The people that are there tend to just stay there, and that's how those communities kind of have such a strong culture as well, because they're more focused on their little small segment of the world, as opposed to running around international travel, international big business. Move, do.
I just to kind of bring this back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier with, trying to get the government to include faith-based organizations. What we're seeing here is like a comparison of culturally, and all of these cultures are very religious. Greece, Italy, Costa Rica, especially, with a massive Catholic influence there. But the spiritual influence does have something to do with the overall contentness and happiness factor, which ultimately ends up being converted into having good health.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue that we've seen in the past probably 40, 50 years is that that American culture has been forcibly separated from the religious and family values that that it was founded on. And now we're seeing that we're kind of paying the price for that in our health. I don't think it's so far off to say that there might be a correlation here between the family values, the religious values, and the overall health of the communities.
Well said, Joshua.
No, I definitely have to agree with that. And as I also, and then also you factor in places that are more remote there's pros and cons to being remote. But I think the places like Greece, Italy, Okinawa, you're going to see more local produce, local food just being consumed, as opposed to importing massively hyper, saturated and sugarized, with crap, food and additives in it. Now you'll see a lot of that in the third world because it's cheap. But in places that are, remote and, not that massive of a population, there's no real incentive for those products to kind of go there. Not that they don't get there, it's just different culture, different way of life. So,
right.
I mean, you're totally right, man. I mean, it comes down to that the policy actually shapes the lifestyle. What the government kind of puts the boundaries on is ultimately going to be, how society flourishes. And I think that you've got some pretty good comparisons here between Japan and the United States.
Yeah, well, I mean, like they have food education as part of their national policy, whereas we just have food programs like SNAP and WIC, but they're heavily influenced by lobbying and the industries that want to push this stuff. And then we have food deserts and stuff like that. And over in Japan, they regulate additives and dyes and are very strict about this stuff, and they encourage domestic agriculture, whereas here we create food deserts. So,
yep.
There's a lot of levels to it, but we got to take our last break here on America Matters. I'm Leo Zacky with Eddie Floyd, Shannon Lawson, and Joshua Triciana. We get back, we'll continue the conversation. We got more to talk about, more subjects. We'll see you in a bit.
At A Proper Fit Footwear in the Reno Town Mall, we've been accomplishing happy feet for over 30 years.
We offer a various range of shoe styles and sizes for both men and women. From all-season shoes and orthotics to work boots and safety shoes, our professional and reliable staff possesses the knowledge to help you find the proper shoes to fit your needs. Hard to fit? Hard to find?
A Proper Fit Footwear is here to give our customers happy feet. We make people aware of potential foot problems as we're sizing their feet, suggesting the right arch support, and guiding them to the proper shoes for their needs.
Stop by a Proper Fit Footwear at 4001 South Virginia Street in the Reno Town Mall today, and allow the owner Mike Jones and our fabulous staff to find the perfect pair of shoes tailored to your specific needs.
A Proper Fit Footwear in the Reno Town Mall, the home of happy feet, where comfort and your feet meet.
Ugh, I'm so over this. I diet, I work out, and the scale won't budge.
I hear you. Nothing's more discouraging than doing all that work and seeing no result.
I just don't get it. I'm eating healthy, hitting the gym. What's your secret?
Honestly, I was in the same boat until I found Active Life Integrated Health.
Wait, what's different about them?
It's a natural weight loss approach. Dr. Tom and his team help with appetite suppression, energy boost, hormone balancing, and the FM diet. It's not about starving yourself or exhausting workouts. It's about resetting your body to burn fat the right way.
I'm Dr. Waldorf, chiropractic physician at Active Life Integrated Health, where our natural approach helps you lose weight safely and effectively without extreme dieting or chemicals. Call 775-842-0065 today to schedule your complimentary consultation. Also, the first 25 callers who mention promo code HealthMatters will receive 10% off of your treatment program. So call 775-842-0065 to boost your energy and start losing weight today.
Want to expand your advertising dollar? Sponsor this or any America Matters program by calling 775-827-8900. Now back to the show.
All right, folks, we are back with America Matters. I'm your host, Leo Zacky, with Eddie Floyd, Shaman Lawson, and Joshua Matriciana today. So glad he's with us. We've been talking about health. We've been talking about religion. And I wanted to kind of move on a little bit, but still stay in the same, realm, because we are at a crossroads here with religion and public schools and the Supreme Court. So in June of 2023, Oklahoma's statewide virtual charter school board approved an application from the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, that is, to open a Catholic virtual school. And that decision was historic. No religious organization had ever been granted public charter funding before. And the Oklahoma Attorney General, Genter Drummond, filed a lawsuit arguing that the move violated both U.S. and Oklahoma constitutions, which require a separation of the famous line church and state. So by June of 2024, the Oklahoma Supreme Court struck down the plan, ruling that public funds couldn't be used to promote a religious institution. So now you fast forward to just yesterday, April 30th, 2025, and the U.S. Supreme Court was hearing the case. And the justices were split right down the middle.
Wow.
Conservative justices drew on past cases like Carson versus Macon and Espinoza versus Montana, the Department of Revenue and Trinity Lutheran Church of Columbia Incorporated versus Corner, and raised the argument that excluding religious groups from public programs may itself be religious discrimination. So Justice Brett Kavanaugh notably remarked that denying the charter seems like rank discrimination. And liberal justices voiced alarm over the potential collapse of the Establishment Clause and the constitutional safeguard that bars government endorsement of religion. And Justice Sonia Sotomayor underscored that charter schools as public entities must remain non-sectarian. And Justice Elena Kagan worried that allowing a religious charter school could dangerously blur the line between church and state. So, to complicate matters, Justice Amy Coney Barrett recused herself from the case due to past associations, leaving the court split with just 8 justices. She's been pretty weak as a Supreme Court justice. I've been very let down by her over the years since she's been in. What do you guys think?
I totally agree with you, Leo.
Yeah, Amy Phony Barrett is what.
Yeah. Man, like we had such high hopes for her to come in here, and she honestly, she has let down a big part of the faith-based community. We thought that she was going to make a stand for, some of the things that, we saw when she was coming in. Some of the stuff that the left was saying, "Oh, you can't have her," and now we're like, well, she kind of lost her spine a little bit. I wonder if somebody, left a threat. I didn't. I was going to make a joke about threatening her dog.
Or blackmail from some sort of
Yeah.
extra governmental organization outside of this country that supports another one, but that's a whole separate subject.
Because it was kind of like like a very. There was a split. There was a time where she was pretty outspoken, and then all of a sudden she's been recusing herself. That's why it makes it. I don't know. My tinfoil hat has been popping on when we talk about her, but we don't have to go into that today.
No, it's certainly fine to have those thoughts and those concerns. Like we mentioned, we've been very let down by what we thought was going to be a good conservative constitutional justice, and well, here we are in a 4-4 deadlock, unwilling to do her job. I mean, if you're unwilling to pass verdict on anything, then should you be a Supreme Court justice?
Amen.
That's a good point, man. I mean, that's literally her job. And when you recuse yourself, you're saying, I'm not going to take this job. And yeah, it doesn't. That's not a good look.
Yeah, I agree.
One thing that you mentioned, I want to cover real quick, because this is something that gets a lot of talk, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. It's with this whole idea of the separation of church and state. You know, there's a difference there from a constitutional perspective. One is talking about like Islam, where there is no difference between the church and the state, or the Church of England, where the king is the head of the church. That's what they were trying to get away, so that a specific denomination or a specific religion wasn't ruling. But this situation here, where allowing a charter school that's also a Catholic school, I don't know if that really gets into that separation of church and state argument.
Well, I just think the people that are arguing against this just hate God.
Yeah.
I mean, look, this country has become quite godless, to say the least, and the decline that we are witnessing is remarkable. The decline in God, the decline in faith, and then the decline in the quality of our life and our society. I mean, look around you. Do you think there's a connection or a correlation? I do.
I do too, Leo. One thing Bubba wrote in, and we'll have to fill Josh in on Bubba.
Bubba!
Yeah, Bubba wrote in, and he said, I think all of you graduated from University of Georgia. He said, it's pretty simple. They eat half the sugar we eat, and they exercise twice as much as we exercise, And so he made a good point about Japan.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of other things, I mean, that we talked about, but
sure.
So, anyways, getting back to the whole, this court ruling. So, if the court rules in favor of Saint Isidore, which is the virtual religious charter school they try to set up, it could pave the way for religious organizations nationwide to be publicly funded charter schools, and fundamentally reshaping the education here in America. So supporters are arguing that this is a victory for religious freedom and parental choice and educational equality, equity. I hate that word. And that the faith-based institutions should have access to public benefits if they meet public standards. Amen. And the opponents are saying, well, it blurs a line between church and state, and we just discussed how that's not exactly how they're abusing that phrase constantly. They love to abuse that phrase. And it'll weaken the public school system, which is already in the gutter. So I don't understand how another level of competition could do anything but force people to shape up or ship out, sort of concept.
Right.
They invite this endorsement of religion from the government that they're so afraid of because they hate God. So the Supreme Court's decision is expected by the summer of this year, and I love how it's just like such a. You really think that they're sitting in their chambers and having a discussion for months on end?
Hell no.
Right. So what is this garbage?
Well, yeah. Why is it taking them so long to rule on something that is so? I think the fact that it is so instrumental, and it will be the foundation of cases from here on out, that you have to give it a lot of thought, discussion, deliberation. So the fact that it's taking them so long, I would rather them spend a little more time thinking about it, weighing out all the options, than make a rushed decision because their dog was threatened, or they got someone sent them a new car, or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Or, some government has blackmail on them because they went on somebody's plane to some island. That same government was help funding, but those are all separate subjects there. Anyway,
shy away from those. But, we all know the subtext. We all know the subtext here.
I hope so. But look, I the fact that we got Amy Phony Barrett holding out on a decision, they're making this, they're pushing back their decision as if they're like a game developer that can't get things out on time, and they have a lifetime appointment to these positions. Where does that leave us? With rulings that I think we need to have more, timely decisions on.
Leo, you bring this. I know this is something that we've hit on a lot. I know this is something close to your heart, something also close to my heart. But the problems that we're facing, in the American society right now, they are deliberate.
Of course.
They are agendas that are being pushed. I mean, to get to the communist system, you have to remove God and the strength of the family unit. You have to remove religion from it so that the government can take that role as God or father or caretaker or whatever. And that's not
Big
what
brother.
Oh, amen, Joshua. Amen.
No, 100%.
So
Well,
the thing is that when you're coming in here and you're talking about this kind of stuff, man, you need what we need is someone like you to say, hey, let's have some common sense here. Let's unscrew the system that has been so rigged against us.
Well, we can do that, but we have to also shrink government down to its basic functions, which is, as you mentioned earlier, securing our borders and making sure our infrastructure operates, and that we have a police and we have a fire and roads that actually work, and the basics of life, and go away from the role of all great provider and nanny state, which they have been cultivating in our minds for decades.
Yeah, it comes down to the Federalist versus Anti-Federalist papers. It's been a long talked about thing. Do the states have more power, or does the federal government have more power? Should the states be the ones that say, hey, you know what? Actually, we will allow Catholic schools to have state funding and keep it out of the federal government completely. I think a stronger state and a weaker federal government is where I lean on this, and I'm sure that you have.
I mean, I like states' rights, but also Constitution is pretty important. So when you start talking about like California, a state that hyper infringes on your Second Amendment, as opposed to Arizona that says go have a blast, quite literally, and their neighboring states, those are kinds of things that I want to make sure the Constitution's upheld.
Talking about that, man, we've got some fun stuff lined up for Freedom Friday as we're coining it for tomorrow. Some things we want to talk about when it comes to the Second Amendment.
I'm looking forward to that. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. You guys will have to tune in for our Freedom Friday tomorrow. So make sure you do. Thanks for joining us.
For one nation under God,
Everybody out there tuning in.
See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow at noon.